Welcome back to ASRM, the 75th year that we've been at this conference. I'm Crisci, co-founder and CEO of MedAnswers, and I am standing with a new friend, Jennifer Eccles from Genomic Prediction. She's the head of genetic counseling. One huge innovation that is happening in our field is around genetic testing of embryos. And I'm really excited to bring this conversation to our patient community. It's one of the most misunderstood
100%.
and misspoken about.
100%.
Right?
Yes.
So let's start with the history of genetic testing of embryos. It used to be called PGS and PGD. Now it's called PGT and PGM, or PGTA and PGTM.
Correct.
So tell us what those types of genetic testing could tell you about your embryos.
Okay, perfect. So PGTA stands for pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidy. And aneuploidy refers to looking at the number of chromosomes that are in an embryo. And typically we have 46 chromosomes in each and every one of our cells. Anytime there's extra chromosome material or missing chromosome material, that's called aneuploidy. And aneuploidy is associated with a higher chance of implantation failure, miscarriage, or potential health problems in an ongoing pregnancy. And so the goal of aneuploidy screening is to address those health issues so that people can pick an embryo with the highest chance of success. PGTM, the M stands for monogenic testing. Monogenic testing refers to looking for health conditions that are associated with a single gene that's located on one of those 46 chromosomes. And we have 20,000 genes that are working in our body. And so people come to us for monogenic testing because they have either a family history of a particular genetic condition that they're worried about. Mom and dad both found out that they're carriers of the same inherited condition. They have a previous child with a particular genetic condition. And that's the purpose of monogenic testing, to address those specific health problems.
And it's things like Tay-Sachs and sickle cell.
Exactly, cystic fibrosis, Marfan syndrome, anything associated with one specific single gene.
And these are devastating conditions a lot of the time. And if you think about the cost benefit to a family, but also to an insurer, if we can use these types of technologies to completely eradicate some of these childhood diseases, it seems like it's the most moral and ethical use of medicine right now.
100%. 100%. The time to test, ideally, is prior to a pregnancy.
Right.
You know, and when you have the option of choosing an embryo that doesn't have one of those major health problems, to reduce the chance of conceiving a baby with one of those conditions and all of that monetary cost and anxiety that goes along with potentially having a baby with one of those, worrisome conditions.
Jennifer, I have a donor-conceived child, and I am a cancer survivor. I'm not BRCA positive, but I did do the screening of the embryos before I transferred them. But even backing up a little further, I picked a sperm donor. And one of the reasons I picked the anonymous sperm donor that I chose was because he had a spotless health history on paper. And since I was already bringing some shoddy genetics to the table, I didn't have a genetic cancer per se, but we didn't really know at the time. Just because I was BRCA negative didn't mean that it wasn't a genetically or familial type of cancer, because there's still so much we don't know about genetics.
100% right.
So I felt like it was so important for me that I used a donor so that my offspring would have the best possible health outcome.
Yes.
But I did that on paper.
Yes.
So now, and we looked at things in the health history, even like acne, was in there. I think one cousin had acne in this donor's health history. We looked at cardiovascular. They looked at things like, did anybody have insulin resistance or diabetes or obesity or dental issues? So now we're moving that paper model to a genetic model.
Real life testing model.
Yes.
Exactly.
So your company, Genomic Prediction, is at the forefront of this evolution.
Yes.
Tell me about what that really means and what it's called when you look at these other conditions that don't have a single gene involved.
Perfect. So we specialize, we're the only laboratory right now that's offering testing for polygenic conditions, so PGTP. We call our testing LifeView. And so the goal of LifeView testing is to offer an additional analysis to be able to identify conditions that are associated with genetic changes in more than one gene. So up until now, we've been limited in the sense that we could test for conditions that only are found in one specific gene, like Tay-Sachs disease or cystic fibrosis. But we know that there are other very important conditions that are associated with many, many different changes in many, many different genes tiled across all of the different chromosomes that we have. Things like type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, certain breast cancers, malignant melanoma, basal cell carcinoma, certain cardiac defects. And so we have a panel of different diseases that can be included with aneuploidy screening, because it's always important to screen for aneuploidy no matter what testing you're doing.
Because you can have, I think that's an important distinction,
Yes.
you can have a disease-free embryo for the diseases that you're looking at and still have an embryo that could miscarry or not implant because it is not a euploid embryo.
That is exactly right. And a clinician will tell a patient to not use that embryo for that exact reason, even if it's negative for Tay-Sachs or even if it's negative for cystic fibrosis, because that embryo doesn't have a chance of implanting, or if it does implant, will likely miscarry. And so the same with the polygenic conditions. We're not going to consider an embryo suitable for transfer, even if it has a low chance for those other disorders.
Now, for somebody like me that's a patient advocate, and our whole company, MedAnswers, and our FertilityAnswers platform is about helping people have healthy children. And looking at obesity rates across the world, not just in the United States, is obesity something that's on the panel that we can help reduce the risk of people developing obesity?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obesity is not on the panel as it stands right now in the way that we have our panel, but what we are addressing, and which is also something that is tied into obesity, are cardiovascular issues, which is connected. So
and the type 2 diabetes.
And the type 2 diabetes, exactly. And so everything on the panel right now is designed to look for conditions that impact lifespan, impact overall health, impact quality of health, and to give patients another layer of information about their embryo so that individuals can triage samples and figure out which sample should we pick that has the highest chance of success.
Great.
We don't put on our reports that embryos should or should not be transferred based on the results of the polygenic testing, because it's complicated. There's a lot of different reasons why people may choose to pick one over the other. That is all, we believe very much in patient choice and patient having the ability to choose for themselves along with their medical practitioner. But all of that information is sort of there for the taking.
And it really is about embryo selection. The best quality embryo for your family goals. And I think that there's some controversy around. There always has been controversy around designer babies. And that's been something largely pushed back in the donor conception market when you go to pick a donor and all the information that we get on that donor. And I personally get frustrated with the term, because I think designer baby is such an overstatement for what it is, for the medical problems that we're truly solving. And the way that I look at it is, if you know that an embryo has reduced risk, from your type of testing for all these different conditions and all these monogenic diseases, why would it be different picking an embryo that isn't at risk for the cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes? It's not different than picking one that doesn't have Tay-Sachs.
Correct, right. So that's exactly right. And we've been used to, in the medical community, already testing for, even in the monogenic space, for conditions that are more risk factors. I mean, testing families where there is actually the BRCA1 or 2 genetic changes in the family is still actually testing for a risk factor, a significant risk factor, and a monogenic one, but still a risk factor. And this is the same. So we're trying to include conditions that are significant. We're not trying to include traits that are just hair color or eye color or things that are not impactful in terms of lifespan or impactful in terms of health, but we definitely are trying to include conditions that do meet those types of criteria so that couples have choices and have options and have the ability to gather as much information as possible about their samples.
I love that lens. I have to say, I really want to acknowledge you and your company for picking that lens, that there's all kinds of things that you could include in the panel, but you have an ethical view that you're taking of if it impacts lifespan, quality of life, and what was the third?
Overall health.
Quality of health. I think that that's fantastic. We want people to live vibrant, healthy lives, as parents, and we want them to have children who live vibrant, healthy lives. Now, how can someone find a clinic that's already offering your panel?
Oh, great question. So we have a website. It's gcplaboratories.com.
gcplaboratories.com.
Yep. It stands for Genomic Prediction Clinical Laboratories. And on our website, we have a list of clinicians that are currently working with us and are sending samples to us.
Great.
And so you could go straight to our website and find us. Our main number is there. I'm very easily reachable, and I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Wonderful. I'm so grateful that you came. Like I said, I'm Crisci, CEO of MedAnswers, coming at you from ASRM, the 75th year of this conference. And you can always find us on the Fertility Answers platform. And we actually do have some folks from Genomic Prediction that are available to answer your questions on the platform as well. Download Fertility Answers on iOS or Android today, and we'll see you there. Thanks.